My parents gave me an eviction notice on my birthday, so I erased them from my life and left them in a quiet house full of regret. I turned 22 3 days ago. I know what you're thinking, 22 and still living at home? Here's the thing, I wasn't some basement-dwelling loser. I was finishing my master's degree in computer science while working part-time at a tech startup. I'd been saving every penny, living frugally at home to graduate debt-free and build a solid foundation for my future. My parents knew this. They'd always been proud of my academic achievements, or so I thought the morning of my birthday started. Normally Mom made pancakes, Dad read his newspaper, and my sister Emma scrolled through Instagram while complaining about her latest drama with her boyfriend. I expected maybe a small celebration later, nothing fancy, just family time. Instead, around noon, Dad walked into the living room where I was reviewing code for my thesis project. He dropped a manila envelope on my laptop. "What's this?" I asked, looking up from my screen. "Eviction notice," he said with a shrug, like he was discussing the weather. "We need you out by Friday." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. "It's my birthday, Dad. Very funny." "I'm not joking, kiddo." He settled into his recliner, completely casual. "Your mother and I have been talking. We're ready to reclaim our space. We booked a month in Bali, leaving Saturday. You can find a couch somewhere." The envelope felt heavy in my hands. I opened it to find an actual legally formatted eviction notice. They'd had a lawyer draft this. "You're serious?" My voice came out flat. Mom appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Please don't make a huge deal about this," she said in that tone she used when she wanted to avoid conflict. "We raised you to be independent. You're 22, it's time. I'm in the middle of my thesis defense next month. I have finals. I've been helping with groceries and utilities." "Which we appreciate," Dad interrupted. "But we're not running a hotel here." Emma looked up from her phone with a smirk. "Maybe this will teach you some life skills." "You moved out at 19, I shot back. "You moved in with Brad after dating him for 3 months. And you're back here every time you two fight." "At least I tried to be independent," she said, rolling her eyes. "You've been hiding behind school as an excuse to avoid the real world." I looked around at my family, people I'd trusted, people I thought cared about me. The casual cruelty of it all hit me like a physical blow. My birthday. They chose my birthday for this. "Bali must be expensive," I said quietly. Dad's expression flickered with something that might have been guilt, but he recovered quickly. "We've worked hard. We deserve a vacation, right?" I closed my laptop and stood up. "I'll be out by Friday." I went to my room and started packing. As I folded clothes and packed books, I could hear them downstairs discussing restaurant reservations for their vacation. Not once did anyone come to check on me or acknowledge that they'd just made their son homeless on his birthday. That evening, I made a phone call. "Marcus, it's me. I need to ask you something, and it might sound crazy." Marcus Chen had been my roommate during undergrad. We'd stayed close even after graduation, and he'd gone on to become something of a legend. While I was pursuing my master's, Marcus had dropped out junior year to start a company. That company was now worth about $50 million, and Marcus, at 23, was the kind of tech wunderkind that got written up in Forbes. More importantly, he was my friend, and he'd been trying to poach me for my graduate program for months. "You know I've been asking you to come work with me for a year," Marcus said after I explained my situation. "The offer stands. Senior developer position, 6-figure starting salary, equity package, relocation assistance to San Francisco. When can you start?" "I haven't finished my thesis." "Forget the thesis. You're brilliant, David. I need someone I trust, and school can't teach you what you learn working with me. Besides, sounds like you need a change of scenery." We talked for 2 hours. By the end of the call, I had a job offer that would change my life. The next 3 days passed in a blur, but let me tell you about those 3 days. They were the most transformative 72 hours of my life. Wednesday night, after my call with Marcus, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation with my parents, analyzing every word, every expression. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not the hot, explosive anger you'd expect, but something cold and calculating. They wanted to teach me about the real world? Fine. I'd show them exactly what the real world looked like. I started making lists, what I needed to do, who I needed to call, how to handle the logistics. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was walking into with Marcus's company. I spent Thursday morning researching everything I could find about Chen dynamics. What I discovered made my head spin. Marcus hadn't just been modest about the company's success, he'd been downright humble. The company had 3 major contracts with Fortune 500 companies, had recently been courted by Google for acquisition which Marcus had turned down, and was projected to go public within 2 years. More importantly, I found articles about Marcus himself, the 23-year-old CEO who's revolutionizing cybersecurity. From dropout to millionaire, Marcus Chen's impossible journey, why Silicon Valley's biggest names are trying to recruit this young genius. Reading about my old roommate's success felt surreal. We used to eat ramen noodles and debate whether we could afford to split a pizza. Now he was being mentioned in the same articles as tech titans I'd only dreamed of meeting. But the best part? In every interview, Marcus mentioned the same thing. He was building his team carefully, looking for people he trusted implicitly. I'd rather work with someone whose character I know than someone whose resume impresses me, he'd said in a TechCrunch article from last month. I screenshotted that quote and saved it to my phone. Thursday afternoon, I called my thesis advisor, Dr. Patterson. She'd been my mentor for 2 years, and I respected her opinion more than almost anyone's. "David, are you certain about this?" she asked after I explained the situation. "You're 3 months from defending, 3 months from your master's degree. Dr. Patterson, with all due respect, what's that degree going to get me? A $60,000 starting position somewhere? Maybe $70,000 if I'm lucky? Marcus is offering nearly triple that, plus equity in a company that's about to explode." She was quiet for a long moment. "You know, in 30 years of teaching, I've seen a lot of brilliant students. Most of them follow the traditional path, degree, job, climb the ladder slowly. But the ones who really change the world? They're the ones brave enough to jump when the right opportunity comes along. So you think I should do it? I think you should trust your instincts. And David, your parents are fools." That last comment surprised me. Dr. Patterson was usually diplomatic to a fault. "I'm sorry," she continued, "but I've watched you work for 2 years. You're dedicated, brilliant, and more mature than students twice your age. The fact that your parents chose your birthday to do this tells me everything I need to know about their judgment." After we hung up, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about escaping my family's cruelty anymore. This was about choosing the life I actually wanted instead of the safe, predictable path I'd been following. I withdrew from my program that afternoon. The registrar was surprisingly understanding. Apparently, students leaving for exceptional opportunities wasn't unheard of. She even expedited the paperwork so I could get my transcript sent to Marcus's HR department. Thursday evening brought an unexpected visitor, my high school girlfriend, Jessica. We'd stayed friends after our amicable breakup 3 years ago, and she'd heard through mutual friends that I was moving. "I can't believe they did this to you," she said, sitting on my nearly empty bed as I continued packing. "Your own family? Neither can I, honestly. But this job thing. Are you sure you're not just running away? Making a decision based on anger?" I stopped folding shirts and looked at her. "You know what the funny thing is? If they'd approached this differently, if they'd sat me down and had an honest conversation about wanting their space, if they'd given me reasonable notice, if they'd shown even a shred of compassion, I probably would have stayed in school. I would have found an apartment nearby, finished my degree, taken some safe corporate job. But now I'm realizing that maybe playing it safe was just another form of hiding. Marcus has been trying to recruit me for months, and I kept saying no because I was afraid. Afraid of leaving school, afraid of failing, afraid of taking risks. I resumed packing. My parents thought they were teaching me about consequences. Instead, they taught me that the biggest risk is trusting other people to have your best interests at heart. Jessica helped me pack my books. As we worked, she told me about her own post-graduation struggles, the unpaid internships, the rejection letters, the constant anxiety about money. "You know what I'd give for an opportunity like this?" she said. "Your parents have no idea what they just handed you." Friday morning was surreal. I woke up in my childhood bedroom for the last time, surrounded by boxes and suitcases. The house felt different, not like home anymore, but like a hotel I was checking out of. I could hear my family moving around downstairs, their excitement about the Bali trip palpable. Emma was on the phone with someone, probably Brad. talking loudly about how she couldn't wait to get some real sun. Mom was in the kitchen, humming while she made breakfast. Dad was watching the news, occasionally calling out updates about the weather in Southeast Asia. None of them came to check on me. I loaded my car methodically, making multiple trips. My entire life fit into 6 boxes, 2 suitcases, and a backpack. 22 years reduced to what could fit in a Honda Civic. On my final trip upstairs, I took a moment to look around my room. The walls still had marks where my posters had hung, and there was a faint outline on the carpet where my desk had been. It looked like a crime scene, evidence that someone had lived here, but that person was now gone. I found myself thinking about all the nights I'd spent in this room, studying for exams, working on projects, dreaming about my future. I'd always imagined that when I finally moved out, it would be a celebration. My parents helping me load boxes, giving me advice, maybe getting a little emotional about their son starting his adult life. Instead, I was leaving like a stranger whose lease had expired. I almost left without saying goodbye, but something made me stop at the kitchen doorway. "I'm heading out," I said. Mom looked up from her coffee, and for just a moment her expression flickered. "Drive safely," she said. "And David? Good luck with whatever this is." Dad didn't look up from his newspaper. "Make sure you return your key." I placed it on the counter and walked out. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of the house in my rearview mirror. It looked smaller than I remembered, somehow less significant. I realized I felt nothing. No sadness, no nostalgia, no regret. Just a strange sense of lightness, like I was finally free to become whoever I was supposed to be. The drive to the airport gave me time to think about what came next. Marcus had arranged everything: my flight, temporary housing, even a welcome package with information about the company and the city. It was the kind of thoughtful attention to detail that my own family couldn't be bothered with. Friday morning, I loaded my suitcase into my car. Dad was in the garage, organizing beach gear for their trip. "You got somewhere to go?" he asked, not looking up from his snorkel mask. "Yeah, I figured it out. Good. Responsibility builds character." I almost laughed at the irony. Saturday arrived, departure day for both of us. My flight to San Francisco was at 2 p.m. Their flight to Bali was at 6 p.m. I timed it perfectly. I arrived at the airport early and waited in the departure area, nursing a coffee and watching for familiar faces. At 5:30 I spotted them, Mom, Dad, and Emma, wheeling their oversized suitcases and chattering excitedly about their adventure. That's when I stood up and walked over with Marcus. Marcus Chen was not someone you forgot meeting. Tall, confident, with the kind of presence that commanded attention. He wore a perfectly tailored suit despite our casual travel day, and his watch probably cost more than my parents' car. "David?" Mom noticed me first. Her face went through several expressions: surprise, confusion, then something approaching alarm when she saw Marcus beside me. "Hi, Mom, Dad, Emma." I kept my voice neutral. "I wanted to introduce you to someone before we both fly out." Dad frowned. "Fly out where?" "This is Marcus Chen," I said, gesturing to my friend. "My business partner." Marcus stepped forward with his $1,000,000 smile and extended his hand. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I've heard so much about you." Dad shook his hand automatically, still looking confused. "Business partner?" "I've been trying to recruit David for months," Marcus explained smoothly. "He's incredibly talented. When he told me he was suddenly available to start immediately, I was thrilled." "Start what?" Emma asked suspiciously. "David's joining my company as senior developer," Marcus said. "We're based in San Francisco. The starting package is $180,000, plus equity and benefits. We're also paying his relocation costs, of course." The color drained from Dad's face. $180,000? "To start," Marcus confirmed. "With his skills, he'll be making much more within a year. We're also fast-tracking him for a leadership position. I predict he'll be a millionaire before he's 25. Mom made a small choking sound. "Of course," Marcus continued, his tone still friendly but with an edge that suggested he knew exactly what those circumstances were. "I was sorry to hear about the circumstances that made him available. Family can be complicated." "Circumstances?" Dad managed. Marcus looked genuinely surprised. "Oh, you don't know? David's been telling everyone about his incredible family support, how you encouraged him to take this leap by—" He paused, as if searching for the right words. "What was the phrase you used, David?" Giving me the push I needed to stop playing it safe, I said, smiling. Something like that. It's inspiring, really, Marcus went on. Not many parents would sacrifice their child's presence to help them achieve their dreams. You must be incredibly proud. I watched my parents' faces carefully during this exchange. Dad's expression had gone from confusion to something approaching horror as the implications sank in. Mom looked like she might be sick. Emma, for once in her life, was completely speechless. Of course, Marcus continued smoothly. I was initially concerned when David told me about the timeline. Giving someone such short notice to uproot their life can be traumatic. But David explained how you'd planned this perfectly, timing his transition to coincide with your own travel plans so the house would be empty anyway. Brilliant family coordination. Timeline? Mom managed to croak. The eviction notice, Marcus said matter-of-factly. David showed me the legal document. Very official. I was impressed by how thoroughly you'd planned his transition to independence. Most parents just have a conversation about moving out, but going through a lawyer? That shows real commitment to the process. The blood had completely drained from Dad's face. He looked like a man who'd just realized he'd accidentally burned down his own house. And doing it on his birthday, Marcus added, shaking his head in admiration. Talk about making the day memorable. David will never forget turning 22. It's the day his real life began. Emma finally found her voice. David, I don't think... Oh, I should mention, Marcus interrupted, turning to me. The signing bonus cleared your account this morning. $50,000 as discussed. That should cover your moving expenses and give you a nice cushion while you settle in. 50,000? Dad repeated weakly. Just the signing bonus, Marcus confirmed. On top of the $180,000 salary, of course. We also provide full medical, dental, vision, 4 weeks paid vacation, and a $10,000 annual continuing education budget. David mentioned he hadn't finished his master's degree. We're happy to pay for him to complete it part-time if he wants, though honestly he'll learn more working with us than any classroom could teach him. I watched as this information hit my family like physical blows. The casual mention of more money than they'd probably see in years, offered to the son they'd just discarded like unwanted furniture. Plus the equity package, Marcus added, almost as an afterthought. David will own a percentage of the company when we go public, probably next year. That stake will be worth... Well, let's just say David's going to be very comfortable. The announcement for their Bali flight sounded again, more urgently this time. That's definitely us, Emma said, her voice strained. She kept looking between me and Marcus, like she was trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. How long will you be gone? Marcus asked politely. A month, Mom whispered. Perfect timing then. David will be completely settled by the time you return. New apartment, new life, new tax bracket. Marcus chuckled at his own joke. Though I suppose you might not recognize him when you get back. Success has a way of changing people. David, Dad started, but I was already turning away. Our flight's boarding too, I said. Enjoy Bali. As we walked toward our gate, I could feel my family's eyes on my back. The weight of their stares was heavy with realization, regret, and something that might have been panic. The announcement for their Bali flight echoed through the terminal. That's us, Emma said weakly. Have a wonderful vacation, Marcus said warmly. Don't worry about David, we'll take excellent care of him. He'll be staying in a company apartment in Soma until he finds his own place, fully furnished, all expenses paid. David? Mom started, but I was already turning away. Our flight's boarding too, I said. Enjoy Bali. I walked away without looking back, Marcus beside me. You're evil, he said quietly, grinning. I learned from the best. As we headed toward our gate, I heard Emma's voice behind us. Mom, did he just say 180,000? I'm writing this from my new apartment in San Francisco, not the company apartment. I found my own place in Pacific Heights with a view of the bay. Turns out, Marcus wasn't exaggerating about the money. The first few weeks here were a whirlwind. Marcus threw me into projects immediately, not as hazing, but because he genuinely needed my skills. I found myself working on cybersecurity protocols for companies I'd only read about in business magazines. The learning curve was steep, but I thrived under the pressure. My colleagues were impressive. Former Google engineers, MIT graduates, people who'd sold previous startups for millions. At first I felt like I didn't belong. Then I started contributing solutions that made senior developers stop and take notes. Marcus had been right about my potential. The work was challenging in ways school never was. Instead of theoretical problems with predetermined solutions, I was solving real issues that affected real companies. When I successfully patched a vulnerability that could have cost our client millions in data breaches, Marcus called it exactly why I hired you. But it wasn't just the professional success that struck me. It was the culture. This was a place where intelligence was valued, where innovation was rewarded, where people treated each other with respect. Nobody dismissed my ideas because of my age. Nobody made me feel like a burden. It was everything my family home hadn't been. My parents returned from Bali yesterday. Emma texted me. Apparently she got my new number from my old roommate, saying, "Mom cried for 2 hours after they got home and saw my empty room. Dad, according to Emma, has been walking around like a zombie and keeps asking if I'm really making that much money." The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd spent a month in paradise while their son was building a new life from scratch. They'd posted photos on Facebook, tropical beaches, expensive dinners, spa treatments. The Bali trip they'd prioritized over their own child had cost them nearly $15,000. Money they claimed they didn't have when I suggested they help with my graduate school expenses. Emma herself has been different. Her last 3 texts have been some variation of, "Can you get me a job there?" Apparently her relationship with Brad ended again, and she's back home with our parents. The irony isn't lost on me. According to Emma's increasingly desperate messages, the house felt wrong without me there. Mom had converted my room into a craft space during their trip, but after one look at my empty walls, she'd moved everything back out and left it exactly as it was the day I left. "She keeps going in there and just sitting on the bed," Emma texted. "It's creepy." I didn't respond to that text either. My parents have been trying to reach me. They found my LinkedIn, which now lists my position at Marcus's company, and saw the Forbes article that mentioned me as one of Silicon Valley's rising stars under 25. The Forbes piece was surreal to read about myself. David Thompson, 22, represents the new wave of tech talent, choosing opportunity over convention. By leaving his master's program to join Chen Dynamics, Thompson exemplifies the bold decision-making that defines Silicon Valley success stories. The article included a photo of me at our company's latest product launch, shaking hands with the CEO of a Fortune 100 company. I looked confident, professional. Nothing like the uncertain graduate student who'd been packing boxes in his childhood bedroom just months earlier. Dad left a voicemail saying they might have been hasty and that they hope we can work things out. His voice cracked slightly when he said hasty, as if kicking your son out on his birthday was just a minor miscalculation in timing. Mom sent a long email about how family is important and how they miss me terribly. She went into detail about how quiet the house was, how Dad barely talked anymore, how she'd been looking at apartments in San Francisco just to see what's available. The desperation in her message was palpable. But here's what struck me most about their outreach. Every single message focused on their regret, their pain, their realization of what they'd lost. Not once did either of them acknowledge the cruelty of what they'd done. Not once did they apologize for the timing, for the callousness, for treating their son like an unwanted tenant. They were sorry they'd made a mistake, but they weren't sorry for hurting me. I haven't responded to either. The silence from my end has apparently been driving them crazy. Emma told me in one of her increasingly frantic texts that Mom has been calling my old friends, my former classmates, even Dr. Patterson, trying to get information about how to reach me. She'd offered to pay for Dr. Patterson's lunch if she'd just give David a message about how sorry they were. Dr. Patterson, to her credit, had refused and apparently told Mom that I was exactly where I needed to be. Marcus promoted me to lead developer last week. The promotion came with a $40,000 raise, bringing my total compensation to over $220,000 annually. The equity package adjustment alone was worth more than my parents' annual household income. My equity package just vested, and between my salary increase and the company's latest valuation, my net worth hit 7 figures yesterday. I'm 22 years old and financially secure for life. The kid they thought needed to learn life skills is doing just fine. But success brings its own challenges. I'd started getting recognized at tech conferences, invited to panels about young entrepreneurs. Each opportunity felt like another step away from the person I'd been in my parents' house and toward someone I was still learning to become. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering what they thought when they saw these articles, these photos of their son in boardrooms and conference halls. Did they feel pride, regret, or just the hollow realization that they were watching their child's success from the outside, like strangers reading about someone they'd never met? Emma showed up at my office yesterday. Somehow, she'd gotten past security, later learned she'd told them she was my sister, and that it was a family emergency. I found her in the lobby, looking small and out of place among the sleek furniture and successful people in expensive clothes. The lobby of Chen Dynamics was designed to impress, floor-to-ceiling windows, modern art, a reception desk that looked like it belonged in a spaceship. Seeing Emma there, in her discount store clothes with her roots showing, was jarring. She looked like what I used to be. Someone from outside this world, trying to find their place. "David, please," she said when she saw me. "I need to talk to you." I almost walked away. The old me would have felt guilty about even considering it. The new me calculated the pros and cons of engaging with someone who'd contributed to my exile. But something in her voice stopped me. A quality I'd never heard before. Vulnerability, maybe, or genuine fear. We went to a coffee shop down the street. She looked different, older, tired. The smugness I remembered was gone, replaced by something that looked like desperation. "Mom and Dad are getting divorced," she said without preamble. That hit me harder than I expected. "What?" "It started on the Bali trip. Dad kept talking about how proud he was of what you'd accomplished, how maybe they'd been wrong. Mom got defensive, said he was rewriting history. That they'd done what they had to do. They fought every day of their vacation." She stirred her coffee absently, not meeting my eyes. "When they got home and saw your empty room, it got worse. Dad found the Forbes article about you and printed it out, put it on the refrigerator. Mom tore it down. He put it back up. She tore it down again." "Emma, let me finish, please." Her voice cracked slightly. "They've been fighting ever since, about money, about decisions, about you. Dad keeps saying Mom pushed too hard, that the eviction notice was her idea. Mom says Dad went along with it, that he's only sorry now because you're rich." I felt a strange detachment listening to this, like she was describing characters in a movie rather than our parents. "The house is toxic now. They blame each other for losing you. Dad's been sleeping in the guest room for 2 months. Mom's been seeing a therapist, but she just cries through the whole session. The therapist told her she needs to process her grief over the loss of her child, and that made Dad furious, because he said he's not dead, just done with us." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "You were the best thing about our family, and we destroyed it because we were selfish and stupid. Mom hasn't been the same since she realized what we did. Dad won't admit it, but he's been looking up apartments for rent near here. I think he wants to move to California to be closer to you." "Emma." "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she interrupted. "I don't deserve it. None of us do. I wanted you to know that we know what we lost, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The tears were flowing freely now, and other coffee shop patrons were starting to stare. This wasn't the composed, sarcastic sister I remembered. This was someone who'd watched their family implode and finally understood their role in the destruction. I moved back home because Brad and I broke up, but really, it was because I couldn't afford rent anywhere else. I've been working retail, barely making minimum wage, watching Mom cry every night and Dad stare at your Forbes article like it's going to bring you back. She wiped her nose with a napkin. "I see what I could have been, what I should have been. You were always the smart one, the responsible one, the one with a plan. I was jealous of that, so I tore you down whenever I could. I thought it was funny. I thought you'd always be there to pick on. You were cruel," I said quietly. "I was worse than cruel. I was stupid. I traded having a brother who loved me for a few moments of feeling superior, and now," she gestured helplessly, "now I work at Target, live with our divorcing parents, and my brother is a millionaire who won't return my calls." She left money for her coffee and stood to go. "I know you probably hate us. You should. But I wanted you to know that losing you destroyed us. Maybe that's justice. Maybe that's what we deserved." She paused at the door. "Oh, and David, I saw the TechCrunch article about your promotion, lead developer at 23. I showed it to some people at work, told them my brother wrote that code they were talking about. I was proud of you. I know I don't have the right to be, but I was. She left before I could respond. I sat there for a long time, thinking about birthdays and family and the person I used to be. The coffee shop around me buzzed with the usual San Francisco energy, startup founders pitching investors at corner tables, tech workers debugging code on laptops, the constant hum of ambition and possibility. This was my world now, and sitting in it while processing Emma's words felt like existing in two realities simultaneously. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated. They were finally experiencing consequences for their actions. Their marriage was crumbling under the weight of their guilt and mutual blame. Emma was learning what it felt like to struggle financially. They were all discovering what life looked like without the son and brother they'd casually discarded. But another part of me felt something I hadn't expected: emptiness. I'd achieved everything I dreamed of and more. I was financially secure, professionally respected, living in one of the world's most exciting cities. Yet, sitting in that coffee shop, processing the destruction of my family, I felt oddly hollow. Success, I was learning, was a complicated thing. It filled some voids while creating others. I'm writing this on my 23rd birthday. I spent it in my penthouse apartment I upgraded a few months ago, with Marcus and some friends from work. We had dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant, and Marcus surprised me with a Rolex for closing the biggest deal in company history. The deal he was referring to had been a 6-month negotiation with a multinational corporation. They'd been hemorrhaging money due to cybersecurity vulnerabilities, and our solution had saved them an estimated $200 million annually. My personal commission from that deal alone was more than most people make in a decade. It was a perfect evening. The restaurant overlooked the bay, the wine was exceptional, and the conversation was stimulating. Discussions about quantum computing, the future of artificial intelligence, IPO strategies. These were my peers now, brilliant, driven people who saw the world in terms of problems to solve and opportunities to seize. But as I was getting ready for bed, I found myself thinking about last year, about pancakes and manila envelopes and the casual cruelty of people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. The contrast was stark. Last year, I'd woken up expecting a simple family celebration and instead received legal documents demanding my departure. This year, I'd woken up in a penthouse worth more than my parents' house, surrounded by luxury they couldn't imagine, celebrated by people who valued my contributions. Yet, somehow, the memory of last year's betrayal still stung more than this year's success satisfied. My parents still don't know my address, but they know where I work. Once a month, like clockwork, I get a package delivered to my office, always from Mom, usually baked goods or old photos or things from my childhood she thinks I might want. Never a note asking for anything, just love, Mom on a card. Dad's been more direct. He sent 3 job applications to companies in San Francisco, all in my building's mailroom. Each one has a sticky note, in case you hear of anything. Dad, he's 54 years old and willing to be a mailroom clerk to be near his son. The applications themselves were heartbreaking in their desperation. I'd seen them before security forwarded them to me, meticulously filled out with references from his old job at the insurance company he'd worked at for 20 years. He'd listed skills like attention to detail and reliable transportation and willingness to learn. A man who'd once dismissed his son's ambitions was now begging for entry-level work in the same industry. The sticky notes got progressively more desperate. The first was simple, in case you hear of anything. The second included, I know I don't deserve help, but I'm trying. The third, which arrived just last week, said, I miss you, Dad. I'd kept all 3 sticky notes in my desk drawer. I couldn't explain why. Emma is the only one who's actually changed. She moved to Portland, started going to therapy, and got a job at a nonprofit. She sends me pictures sometimes, her new apartment, a hiking trip, her volunteer work at an animal shelter, never asking for anything, just sharing her life, like she's hoping that someday I might want to be part of it again. Her messages have evolved over the months. The early ones were desperate apologies, then came updates about our parents' deteriorating situation, but lately, they've been different. Glimpses into a person I'd never known existed, photos of her reading to shelter dogs, volunteering at food banks, taking night classes to finish her degree. She was becoming someone I might actually respect. The last message included a photo of her at a 5-kilometer run she'd organized for homeless youth. She looked healthy, confident, genuinely happy. The caption read, "Raised $15,000 for kids aging out of foster care. Thought you might like to know your sister is finally doing something worthwhile." I hadn't responded to any of them. Marcus thinks I'm being too hard on them. People make mistakes, he says, even big ones. Maybe he's right. Maybe I'm being too hard on them. But then I remember the smirk on Emma's face when she talked about teaching me life skills. I remember Dad's shrug when he said I could find a couch somewhere. I remember Mom telling me not to make a big deal about being made homeless on my birthday. I remember how they looked at me like I was a burden they couldn't wait to shed. So maybe I'm being too hard on them. Or maybe some lessons stick with you forever. Either way, I'm not the same person who lived in their house a year ago. That David was naive enough to think family meant unconditional love. This David knows better. This David has learned some life skills of his own. And the most important one? Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and letting the people who wronged you watch from a distance, as you soar higher than they ever imagined possible. Happy birthday to me.